Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burckhardt. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is July 31st, 2024, and have I got a fun show for you? This author was such a blast to chat with. We had so much fun, and you're going to get to hear all of it here in just a moment. Now, don't forget, tomorrow the next issue of Book Banter magazine drops. You can find it on our website at burkhartbooks.com, and you can also find it in Share Magazine, anywhere that you find those signs if you are in an area that provides that service. Now, let's get on with this show. Our author today is known for her captivating young adult sci-fi and dystopian novels, and today we're going to talk about her recent release, Beyond Power, a supernatural sci-fi romance. So sit back and get ready to enjoy a fantastic conversation with a wonderful person. Please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burckhardt, Lina Hart. As always, we just start out by having our guest explain who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Lina Hart, and I write sci-fi novels. I think that's the basis of it. The current book that I have out right now is actually a sci-fi dystopian romance. So I have a couple of different elements in there. And I just hope to write until the end of time is basically what what I do.
And it seems like you had this path towards being a writer from the beginning.
I think so. I mean, I don't know if I knew that when I was young, because it was all about books and reading them and loving them. And it wasn't until high school that I realized that I could actually create that, that I could actually be the one behind the words and making it into something. So it was always a dream of mine to someday be a writer. And it wasn't until like the middle of 2022 that I came across a post on Instagram, and they were talking about how you could be an indie author, how that could be a career path. And I was like, hold on a second. You don't have to wait for some publisher to come and tell you that your book's good enough. You can do that by yourself. What is that? And that was it. I kind of dove right in and took my family with me, and here we are.
I have to admit, while I was reading your About Me page on your website, I got tired because I'm sitting here reading, okay, you graduated with a degree in linguistics, then you were moving around the country. Then about a decade later, you have a new home, a new husband, a blended family of 6 kids, multiple businesses, full marketing brands for dozens of companies, and now you're a writer.
I'm tired too. I'm going to go get that coffee we were talking about.
So I think the next thing you should do is teach a class on time management, because how do you manage all of this?
Oh, I don't time manage anything. I think I sleep for most of it and miss everything, and I'm late to every meeting on the planet. Other than that, I think we're fine. I think everything's good.
That makes me feel better about my life then.
There you go. I'll teach people that it's okay to be late. There you go. That'll be my message.
I think that's probably something that a lot of people do need to hear, that it's okay if you can't do everything perfectly. It's perfectly fine and human.
Oh my gosh, and it's totally true. And, sometimes you have to pick one thing over the other. And for a while, when I actually wrote Beyond Power, I was picking sleep over time with everybody. I would literally have friends over, and I'm like, my bedtime is 10 p.m. I'm getting up at 5:30 a.m. and I have words to write. I have a deadline. And they're like, really? You're going to bed? Like, yeah, I'm going to bed. So sometimes you kind of do. Sometimes you have to pick one thing over another. Sometimes you can, manage it all at one time. It just kind of depends on what it is, I guess.
I think people just have to give themselves permission to do that.
I would agree.
Now, I know you write what is considered to be young adult books. Do your kids have any inspiration in you choosing to do that?
My kids themselves, I mean, one specifically, yes, not all of them, because obviously, we have a very big family, but the second daughter down, she's a big reader like I am, and she loves books, and we have a series we read together, and I wanted to write something that I knew that she would like. And there were many times that I was like, oh, you're gonna love this scene, and so she was kind of my inspiration for this particular book, because I wanted to make sure it would be something that she would love to read. Past that point, I think the rest of the kids, like, I kind of take pieces from them. Like our teenager, he said something one day and it just sparked an idea. Now I have the ending of my entire series because of him. So
wow.
If I'm not, writing it for one of them, they're definitely giving me inspiration for, bits and pieces here and there throughout the series.
So, what was it that inspired you to go with a sci-fi series?
Well, honestly, I am a very big Trekkie. I am back when my dad would have a VHS coming to the house every day of the next Star Trek episode. And we used to watch it. We'd come through once a month. And, that's where everything started for me was back with Star Trek and Jean-Luc Picard and everything and going to space. And like, it was just so amazing to me. And to be honest with you, when I started writing Beyond Power and kind of outlining and kind of building on the story, I kind of start with the relationships of the characters. And then from there, I kind of build out what world are they going to be in and, what environments and, what's their status and that kind of thing. But I was actually trying to steer away from sci-fi and anything other than like a contemporary story. I was just going to put them on Earth, write what I know, get my first series out and see how it went. And I just could not move away from sci-fi. Elements of sci-fi kept pulling themselves in. And I actually have it in my notes. I wrote down, okay, fine, I guess we're writing a sci-fi novel. And that was the end of it. And once that happened, I dove right in. And the next thing I know, I have DNA things that are changing people's, ways to have supernatural powers. And I'm like, all right, this is not the direction I was going, but we're going to go with it because if I love it, then, I'm going to love writing it. So that's kind of where it went.
Now, I know one of the other descriptors used for your book is magical realism. How does that blend with sci-fi?
Well, a lot of people actually gave me a compliment about that. When it comes to the supernatural powers that my characters have, I didn't want them to just wake up and they have supernatural powers. I wanted to have something rooted in science. Not for nothing, my husband is a science physics genius and he has taught me so many things over the years. And a lot of the things he gave to me was like, oh, this is how you can make this more realistic. And I really love the idea of having a sci-fi novel that kind of connects to something that's real. That's why I like Star Trek because it was definitely sci-fi with a little bit of realistic to it. So for me, the supernatural powers, I didn't want them to just be able to make fire from their hands. I wanted there to be a reason. And for nothing, that became the entire plot line for the antagonist. He is looking for a super healing gene and he ends up waking up a supernatural gene within humans who happen to have that gene. So it's very scientific in that it almost seems like it's possible if that was something that existed, but it doesn't have just a magical, I have a wand or it just comes from within me. There was a specific reason why it came about. So that's why I kind of call it magical realism. I actually think my editor coined that phrase, which I thought kind of worked really well. So that's kind of how that went.
I know you also have a romantic aspect to this book. Do you find it hard to write romance for a young adult audience?
I don't know if it was necessarily hard. To be honest with you, I didn't really know how to write that for the young adult audience, to be honest with you. I just kind of wrote it and then gave it to my editors. And I was like, how is this? Like, is this too much? Is this okay? And, thankfully, they're like, no, it's on par. It's actually good. So that made me happy. So now I kind of was able to have that gauge of what's too much and what's too little. But honestly, what came out was what we kept. So that works. So that means I'm at least within the realm without having to adjust anything. But I've had that question before, like, how do you write it for young adults? And I don't really have an answer. I kind of just write it and then see what happens. So
Sometimes that's just the best way to go about it, though.
I think so. I think so.
Now, I know you also use a multi-point of view in your storyline, and you have quite a cast of characters. Do you ever worry about that being confusing?
I did when I first laid it all out. I laid each character out one at a time. So it was kind of like their storyline from start to finish. And then what I like to say is I kind of shuffled them like a deck of cards and I kind of made sure that all the pieces went together enough that you would keep suspense from one to the next because you get answers to questions from one character, maybe 3 or 4 chapters away from when the question popped up. Or we have what's called crisscross chapters where you get one specific scene from one point of view, and then maybe 2 chapters later, you get the same scene from another character's point of view. And that kind of just creates like a deeper dynamic of emotions between these characters that you may not have seen otherwise if you only saw it from one perspective. So I think because each chapter is one character, I think that kind of helps kind of keep within like one character's brain so you don't feel like you're bouncing around. But I did have one piece of feedback that it was like, let's say someone put the book down and they come back to it 2 days later, they might forget like which 3 characters they just read about. So I actually created with my husband, he's the graphic artist over here. I just throw ideas at him. He created a graphic that is basically the chronological timeline of the chapters in order. So right now you can actually get it on my website, but the next version of the book that's coming out, I'm actually going to put the timeline on every chapter. So that way, as the characters kind of go and progress and it changes and it moves, the readers can actually follow along and know exactly where they are. So right now, I don't know if it's necessarily confusing, but it definitely has a little bit of a learning curve. So we're going to try to like lessen that curve a little bit on the next version that I send out.
I saw that timeline that you have on your website. That is fantastic. That is such a great idea.
Yeah, well, I mean, when your readers are saying they need something, you
Yeah.
want to be able to provide that. So when they're saying, I wish I had a map, that's what some of them said. I'm like, all right, here you go, you got one now. So hopefully that should help a little bit.
Well, and I am personally a huge fan of the multi-point of view. I wrote my entire Into the West Saga serial that way too.
Oh,
I
awesome.
think that it gives readers a deeper insight into the actions of different characters because you're not just looking at from one point of view, you're getting other thoughts and you understand the interconnection of the characters so much better that way.
I completely agree with you. I feel like, especially from the antagonist point of view, I feel like, you might have a chapter from the antagonist point of view, maybe 3 in the entire book of 30 chapters. And not that that's a bad thing. And that works, very well for a lot of authors. But I feel like for me, I want you to care about all of the characters. I want
Hmm.
you to know what they're thinking and why they're doing it. I don't want my antagonist just to be a bad guy because he's a bad guy. I want you to know why he's doing experiments on humans and why he's okay with that. I don't want you to just think he's some evil person. I want you to like the method behind the madness, like you just want him to know like what he's thinking. So all of my chapters are written from first person because I don't want you to just also know. I want you to really feel and like be in their heads. And when someone says something and they're internally rolling their eyes, I want you to know and feel that with them. So I think it definitely brings out a lot more, like you're saying. It definitely has a very different dynamic when you have more of an insight from multiple points and when you can be inside of their heads too.
Now, this first book, Your Beyond Power, that's part of a planned trilogy. Is that right?
Yes, it is. It's funny because it was a planned duology originally. It was going to be just book 1 and 2 back to back, seamless from one chapter to the next. And then I decided to throw a novella in the middle, and that kind of became book 2. And it basically was going to be like a backstory to kind of give you more information about other characters that you're going to meet in the last book. And then it morphed again and kind of became an origin story. So it's actually the second book is called Beyond Ruin Origins because we actually get a backstory. We actually go back in time about 20, 30 years and get to learn even more of an insight on the antagonist from when he was a teenager and kind of what changed him and what kind of like how he followed the path that he followed to get to where he is that you read in book 1 and book 2. So really from book 1 to book 3, it's back to back. Like it could be completely seamless, but the book in the middle, it's kind of like an origin, like novella story in the middle. It's not as long, it's about half the length, but it's still a full novel with a lot more information and a lot of background for people to get some more interesting insight in.
I'm getting the feeling that you are probably a pantser when it comes to writing.
you know, people think that, but I'm really not. Okay, let's bring that back. I kind of am in terms of when it comes to outlining, I will have chapter 1 is going to be this, and she's going to walk here and she's going to meet this person. This is the conversation that they're going to have. That's the extent of my outline. I
Mhm.
just kind of have a very broad stroke outline, and then I get in there and I write. And so that's kind of where the pantsing comes in because I don't know what the conversation is about. I won't even say, oh, they're going to talk about robots. Or maybe I will, but I don't have anything else. I don't talk about the banter. I don't talk about, maybe this is where they're really going to start to like each other. No, no, no. I let the characters tell me what they want to talk about, and that's what we write about.
Mhm.
So it's pantsing in that I don't have a very detailed outline chapter to chapter. It's really a very broad, like, this is the character, this is what she does, and go.
Yeah.
And then you kind of just dive in.
That's about the way that I do it. I have a layout program called Vellum for Mac.
Oh, love it.
And I'll go in there and I'll just say, okay, first chapter, she goes to town. Second
Yep.
chapter, she meets this guy. Third chapter, and I sit there and lay out just the basic, like one sentence for each chapter and then just
Mhm.
start writing.
That's perfect. Sometimes the brain, that's all it needs.
Yeah.
That's good.
So now, why don't you go ahead and give us a brief explanation of Beyond Power?
Okay. The short version, since there's obviously so many point of views, I kind of focus on 3 different aspects of it. So there's the present timeline where you're going to get romance and a love story and 2 characters that grow together and as individuals. And there's a lot of secrets and love that comes from that. And then you have the antagonist who is trying, really honestly, trying to save the world, even though it gets a little skewed along the way. And there's genetic tampering and testing on humans and, supernatural powers that come from it. So we kind of have that timeline. So that's the present timeline that twists. And then the future timeline is another character. She's actually in the dystopian future. So she's about 20, 25 years in the future, and 99% of the world population is gone. So there's a lot of story there to kind of build you into why did that happen? Because you're in the present, you're watching these people fall in love, you're watching the scientist, what he's doing, and then you also know that eventually everyone is gone and we don't know why. So I kind of weave those completely together throughout the entire story. And I think I built some suspense. So some people are like, oh, it's kind of like a mystery. Like, it kind of is because you don't know what's going to happen next. But those are the main elements with obviously some other characters thrown in there to add a little bit of twist and turn, and from different aspects. So it's a little bit of everything.
And one of the things that I do love about your freebies that you have up on your website is you also have character sheets. So
Mm-hmm.
people can actually find out more about each character in this book. And I think that would just bring the book so much more alive to them having that information in their head when they're reading this.
Yeah, I think so. And I have actually, as Taylor Swift does, little Easter eggs in there. Like there's some pieces that you see there that you don't even know what they are, what they mean. But when you read the book, if you went back and looked at the picture, you'd be like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe she told us that right in our faces. And we had no idea. So I think so too. Sometimes for me, like it's all about the characters. And sometimes you just want that character sheet that gives you like a little bit of information that you didn't have before. And I think, graphically, I think they're pretty beautiful too. Not for nothing. So I'm a big fan of them as a reader, so I wanted to give that to my own readers as well.
Well, and one other thing that you do that I love whenever authors do this is you have connected merchandise to your
Yes.
book. And
Yes.
not just connected merchandise to the book, to each character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That is brilliant.
thank you. I appreciate that. That was just one random idea. I was sitting there thinking about offering merch, and I was just thinking about, like, I love the merch, the shirts with the quotes and the
Hmm.
pictures of the characters. Like I love all of that. Like I'm a
Yeah.
big fan of all of that. And I'm just thinking, like, what's something that I could give different? And then I remember thinking about some of the outfits that my characters wore. And I was like, you know what? That would be a really cool shirt to wear. And it was like, wait a second, hold on. And then I just went back through my book and I found like the best outfits that I could find that had something that would actually be visual that you could remember. And that was it. It was a lot of fun designing them and creating them and actually making the logos for these businesses within my books that didn't actually exist until I decided to create something from them. So that was a lot of fun by itself.
Well, and there was one piece that I thought was just so cool, and that's the little black dress for Dr. Logan.
Mm-hmm. I
Because
really,
it's a
yeah.
simple black dress, but then your logo is on the back, right between
Mm-hmm.
the shoulder blades.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh my God, that is so great.
Yeah, and not for nothing that, like I said, all of these outfits are actually already in the book. So when it came to Dr. Logan and I'm looking for something for her, and I'm like, I mean, she's wearing a lab coat, like I'm not
Hmm.
saying, but she's wearing a dress underneath. And one of the other characters, there's kind of like a little kind of a spicy romance between her and somebody else. And, he's always wondering, like, what is she wearing underneath there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when he eventually finds out it's a little black dress, like, I just thought that would be one of those things that would be interesting to put up there. And like you said, very simple, but it has a lot of meaning for that particular character.
So I think that you're doing fantastic with all of this. Are you carrying all of the same characters into the next book?
Well, not into book two since we go backwards in time, but in book three, absolutely. They're actually going to be more intertwined even before because a lot of the characters are separate, kind of going along their own timelines, and they come together a little bit at the end of book one. But in book three, they are all thrown together in a pot in multiple timelines. So, yeah, they definitely will all be together with all of their fun little different personalities and interacting together. I'm already very excited because I already see plenty of arguments in the future. So, this should be fun.
So now this is a good time to do our 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but I just refuse to give up because I'm that kind of a personality. Are you
Okay,
ready?
I'm ready. Yeah, I'm definitely ready.
So, question 1, what is your favorite summertime activity?
Ooh, my favorite summertime activity. I honestly like when the sun goes down and there's a bonfire because
Ooh,
it's nice.
nice.
It's warm outside and you don't have to go put on a sweatshirt or anything. You can just stay in the same thing you're wearing all day. But then that fire is just really nice and kind of get the s'mores out for the kids too. Why not have a
Yeah.
s'more too? But I think sitting around the fire with your friends and just relaxing and doing nothing but staring at fire is actually really relaxing and probably one of my favorite things.
That's really funny that you say that because whenever I'm reading a book, I like sound because I have ringing in my ear. So I need something to kind of drown that out. But I don't want to listen to music with words while I'm reading. I
Right.
have a soundtrack that's a crackling fire, and that's what I
Oh,
listen to when I'm reading a
that's
book.
amazing. I love that. That's a good choice. I like that one.
So, question two. What is your preferred go-to genre when you want to pick up a book to read?
Mine is fantasy romance, actually. It's funny because I thought that I would be more of a fantasy romance writer, and then
Hmm.
my first book came out, and I was like, "Nope, we're going sci-fi." So I think in the next series, I want to pull a little bit of sci-fi fantasy and kind of bridge those two together a little bit because
Hmm.
I definitely don't read sci-fi. I absolutely do not read sci-fi. I've watched sci-fi. If there's a sci-fi movie that pops on Netflix, I'm here for it. I am all in, but I never really read sci-fi. I'm all about fantasy and magical, actual magic. I'm here for it. So I think definitely fantasy at the high end, but I'm a big sucker for romance. So I think fantasy romance, those two together are definitely my faves.
And who's your favorite author?
Oh, I can't tell you that. I don't have an answer. That's hard. Like pick a genre. Look, I can tell you growing up, the person that I read the most was Stephen King. And
Oh
I
yeah.
most of the time would ask me like, who's your favorite? I would say Stephen King. And then I got a little bit older and then Christopher Paolini popped out with Aragon and my whole world was like, oh my God, you're so young and you're so amazing. And like, love that. Right. And then you just kept going. And then like you just find another author that you love, then you love and you love. And right now I'm reading the Shatter Me series, and like I've never read anything so heart-wrenching in my life, and it's absolutely incredible. But then you read the next one. So I don't really have an answer to that
Yeah.
question. All I know is that I love writers that make me feel, that make me like want to throw the book across the room, but also make want to like hug the author, like, thank you so much for bringing that together. So there's a lot of authors out there that I love very much, but I do know that Stephen King's where I started. So I always stick with he's definitely a fave.
Question three.
Hmm.
Since you are a Trekkie, this is going to be a tough one.
Oh, goodness.
Which Star Trek character is your favorite?
Oh, yeah. My two favorites actually would be Spock and Data. And it's funny because they're both the most emotionalist characters in the series, but I think it was more watching them learn how to like work and be with like Data doesn't have emotion obviously, but he still had like where he tried to be and tried to understand, and like watching him grow through that was one of my favorite things. And the same thing with Spock, where he actually felt emotion and like had to find his way through that whole process of he shouldn't but he does. So those two characters were my favorites for probably the same reasons, even though they were complete, one's a robot and one's a Vulcan, but they were definitely two of my favorite characters in both of those series.
Okay, now this isn't part of the five quick questions, but I'm just curious. Do you ever go to Comic Cons?
I I would love to someday. Maybe, when the world calms down and all my kids, don't need me to do something for them every day. I'll be able to go. But I think I would definitely love to go, and I want to get my Trekkie on and get all the outfits. I want Vulcan ears. I want all the things.
You would love it in Germany. They've got a Comic Con about every 3 months. It's crazy.
Wow. I'm
Yeah,
coming. I'm coming
it's
to visit.
fun.
I'm coming to visit. That sounds amazing.
So, question four. With six kids, I'm sure that at some point somebody has asked for a pet. Do you have any?
Oh, it's funny. I don't think any of the kids have actually ever asked for pets, but we've had pets. Like my son, for his eighth birthday, he's a big fan of Minecraft. He's been a Minecrafter for like
Hmm.
5 years. Like, a lot of kids that age, but for him, it's good. He loves to build. He's a world builder. He'll have an idea. Oh, I have an idea. Can I go build it? But in the world, they have different animals, and one of the animals I have is an oxalotl, and I didn't even know that was a real thing. I didn't even know that that was something that existed in real life until my husband brought it up, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? We can buy him an oxalotl? Like that's actually a thing.
They're
And
adorable.
they are so cute. And his name is Royne, a name that my son named him. But he is here and he sits right by the front door, and he is so cute with his big eyes. But when my son saw him, he's looking at us, we look at that, he's like, wait, that's a real oxalotl. And I think that was the best because like what a random pet to have. But he loves them, and we love, feeding him the worms and all the things, is great. Before that, we had a chameleon. So we're big reptile fans in this house, but we do have our little fluffy puff, the fluffy baby who runs around. He's the king of the castle. So, he's adorable. And whenever he gets a haircut, everyone like passes him around because he's so soft and fluffy. So, gotta love that.
That's great. So, question five. With you being one of our summer reads authors that we're suggesting people get your book for the summer to read, who is somebody that you would recommend for people as a summer read?
I actually have a lot of book talk friends, and some of them, they're indie authors like me, and they're
Mhm.
running around and doing all the things. And there's one of them that I love her so much. She's definitely one of my favorites, and her name is Nicole. I always pronounce it wrong, but it's McKeon. It's Mckeon. And she is amazing. She's a fantasy author, and she calls herself an unrepentant nerd. That's what she says. I love that about her. She's a nerd like the rest of us. But I love her because she does her own graphics. Like, she creates the graphics for her book. So she creates the images and the illustrations, and she does that. And she's really amazing. So she's definitely one of my favorites. I definitely look up to her too. But in general, her books are really great. So I would definitely recommend her. She has 2 different series that she came out with last year. We kind of came out in the same year in 2023. So it's pretty amazing to have another indie author, to kind of like be side by side with. So I would
Yeah,
definitely recommend her as reading if you like other fantasy books.
that's fantastic. Now, where can people find you and your books?
I think Amazon is the place to live, where you can physically find a book. That's the only place you can really find it right now. You can find me floating around on TikTok and Instagram. I'm there too, and the same thing for Facebook. But yeah, I think I float around TikTok the most because I feel like I reach more people because we have more conversations.
Yeah.
We have more to talk about on TikTok. So that's probably, if you want to come have a conversation, you'll probably find me there talking about something.
This has been absolutely fantastic. I'm going to make sure that all of the information is in the description of today's podcast. It's also going to be on our website and the Summer Reads issue of Book Banter magazine that dropped June 1st.
That's great. Thank you.
I cannot thank you enough. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, it really has. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining from across the world and talking about my book with me. That was, what else are you going to do today?
So there you have it, folks. The amazing Lina Hart. If you have not read her book yet, please go to Amazon right now and buy a copy and read that sucker because you will have a blast. And don't forget, if you want to find her on social media, all of her links are available in the description of today's podcast, and you will find them on our website at burkhartbooks.com. Now, next week on August 7th, if you are a fan of true crime, this will be an episode you do not want to miss. We are going to be speaking with retired forensic investigator Gerardo Bloisy. He wrote the book CSI, the Casey Anthony child murder case. He was the lead detective on this case, and he takes us behind the scenes in his investigation. And if you check out our next issue of Book Banter magazine, which drops tomorrow, you can read more about this author and all of the authors coming up through August and September. We have some incredible authors coming up who have written memoirs, true crime. We have people who have written fiction novels that are based on real people and real events. If you enjoy all of these kinds of things, you will not want to miss all the shows coming up in our next interview set through August and September. So that's about it for today, folks. I hope you all have a wonderful day and you're not boiling wherever you are. I've seen that across my home state of Kansas, they have record highs right now. So I hope everybody has some great air conditioning and can stay inside. But for now, it's time for you all to go forth. Try not to melt. And be really happy.